Hello and welcome to eTravel Hands-On Training. My name is Kelly McGarry with Travel Services. You may have heard us as Travel Office, but we just recently announced our name is Travel Services. So if you've heard Travel Office before, just now know that we are Travel Services. And at the time of seeing this video, Travel Services as well. Just a little background about me. I started at the university over 4 years ago. Started with the College of Ed, and over there I did travel reimbursements. So that's kind of how I got started in travel. And then after about a year or so, I migrated over to central office travel services, more on the compliance and then training environment perspective as opposed to actually processing reimbursement. Just so you know, the agenda today. So the focus of this class is going to be on travel reimbursement. We do have another class called Travel Policies and Procedures. The focus of that class is more on the compliance, whereas in this class, we're taking a look more at how reimbursement works systematically. So we're going to be taking a look at some tips and tricks on the reimbursement software, the travel dashboard, kind of some things you can customize. We're going to be taking a look at a travel profile, which can help you a lot in the long run if you're going to be in a support role processing lots of reports. And then we'll be taking a look at an actual reimbursement or an expense report. And then after that, we'll kind of take a look at a few more things that travel services does, as well as kind of where that expense report goes, and some other things to sort of keep in mind, after you've submitted the report into the future. With that, let's go ahead and get started. And let me go ahead and just flip the screen real quick. Alrighty. So what we're taking a look at right now is what we refer to as the travel dashboard. And there's a couple different ways to get to Ariba. Kind of the best way to do it is to go ahead and just bookmark our homepage. If we ever make any changes to our homepage and to our website, we'll always have kind of a quick access to get to Ariba. And if you just Google UW Travel Services, it should come right up. And so again, you're looking at the travel dashboard. One thing that you can do with the dashboard, which is kind of nice, is you can actually customize these boxes. So as far as like layout and customizing the travel dashboard itself, this is kind of the only kind of sort of main thing that you can do. But when you get into Ariba, your travel dashboard may look a little bit different than mine, and it's because of what I was just mentioning. So you can actually move some stuff around. So you'll see if I start to click and drag my mouse that these little blue dotted lines will appear. And so what you do then is just click and move it around. And what you do is wait for those dots to appear. And then when I let go of the mouse, now you'll notice that it'll pop and sort of drop into that new location. And so it's kind of the same for all these different boxes. Kind of pick it up, wait for those blue dots to appear, and then drop it into slot. You may have to try it a couple times. It's a little sensitive. Let's see, that one's getting a little confused. Now you can see the My Documents moved down to this section. So again, those are all blocks. And you'll see those kind of preset locations. You can drop them accordingly. Before we move on, I just want to highlight kind of what the sort of main boxes that you're taking a look at are. The two kind of main ones to sort of become educated on are this To Do and My Documents section. And so what those two sections are, let me pull them back to the top, is the to do section is anything that is requiring an action from you. So in our office, we actually do approve and deny expense reports, and we'll kind of touch on that when we get to the approval flow later on in the class. But because of that, we are in an approval role, and so I'm actually usually working out of the to do section more than I am other sections because there's constantly something that's requiring action from me. The other section is the My Documents, and the difference between the My Documents and To Do is the My Documents is anything that you actually created yourself in the system. So if you're going to be someone who is in a preparer role, you'd generally be working out of that one as opposed to the To Do section because you actually came into the Ariba system and created an expense report yourself, and so therefore it is going into your My Documents section. Another thing I haven't touched on, so kind of what we're looking at. So we refer to it as the travel dashboard or eTravel, but you'll see in the top right this word Ariba. So Ariba is the the platform that we actually use for reimbursement. It's called Ariba Spend Management. And if you've worked at the university or done other financial functions at the university, Ariba does also do other things besides travel. So when you hear Ariba, don't think just Ariba is just travel. Ariba supports quite a few financial functions at the university. But when you hear eTravel or if you hear expense report, that is when we are specifically talking about travel. So expense report could mean, different things to different institutions or, different companies. For the University of Washington, at the time of this video, what we're talking about is a travel reimbursement. So just a little backstory on kind of the platform that we're working out of. The next thing we're going to take a look at is some settings you can change in the preferences. The one that we're going to take a moment to highlight are the email notification preferences. So as you start to work in Ariba, you'll notice that Ariba actually generates automatic emails. So you'll start to become more familiar with them as you work in Ariba, but you will notice that you do receive quite a few emails, and it's just kind of based on what you're doing in the system. So like an approval, or if you deny something, things like that starts to trigger these notifications. But just so you know, as a user, you can actually come in and make some changes to those email notifications. And to get there, you'll come to this ribbon, and I'm going to zoom us in just a little bit. But if you come to this preferences button right here at the top, there is a button that says change email notification preferences. And so just so you know, you can actually make changes to these other financial functions as well. But again, like I mentioned, travel at the University of Washington, we're talking about expense report. So anytime you want to make a change to travel, you're going to come to expense report. And so these are the different options. I'm not going to go through every single detail on these. You'll become a little more familiar with kind of what they mean as you start to get the emails. But one I like to highlight is this one right here, which says each time the document is approved. So when I used to be in my preparer role, I used to like to have this one unchecked. And the reason for that is each expense report generates several email notifications. And because it has to go through an automatic approval flow, I noticed that it felt like I was getting a little bit too many emails just based on the report moving through just going naturally through the approval flow. I felt like it was just a little bit more necessary just for me to know when it was finally approved. But again, this was kind of just personal preference and what made sense in my specific workflow. But I just like to highlight it just because you will notice as a preparer that is the one that is generating kind of the most notifications within your inbox. And so if you feel like it's not necessary to check every time it moves along the approval flow, that might be a solid one to uncheck. So just a suggestion, but just keep in mind, or just keep an eye out on those different emails coming out, and just know that you can come make some changes here. If you do make changes, just do make sure that you click this save button right here. And so that way it catches. So if you could cancel or anything like that, it's obviously not going to catch. So just make sure you click the save button. Okay. So those are the email notification preferences. Next thing is I'm just going to touch on kind of these other sections that we didn't take a look at. The search function, I am going to actually take a look at the main search function a little bit later on in the class. So we'll kind of hold off on that for now. The recently viewed tab, super self-explanatory, but it's just kind of generally anything you've recently viewed. To be honest, I just haven't really used it a whole lot. But if you find it useful, you can, give it a more prominent spot on your homepage. And then these other common actions. So the reason I had never really used these a whole lot is they are kind of in these create and other options up here. So kind of personal preference, but just know there is the common action. So if you kind of like that's there, you can highlight that on your dashboard as well. But for the class, we're going to be kind of doing the actions out of the main ribbon. So that's kind of why we're not really going to be working out of those. And the next thing we're going to take a look at is what we refer to as a travel profile. And so what the travel profile is, or where it can be useful, is anytime you're in a support role and you're going to be doing multiple expense reports for the same traveler. So essentially what it does is once you've built the travel profile for somebody, it is going to auto-populate that information into their expense report each time. If you don't have a travel profile for them, it's totally fine. It's a free text box or information that you have to enter. So essentially, what would happen is it's going to be blank, and then you would just have to fill it out. But if you're going to be in a support role, and let's say you got somebody who does multiple trips per year, and you plan on you're going to be working there for a while. In that case, then this could definitely save some time in the long run. But let's go ahead and jump into it. And so to create a travel profile, what you do is come to this create button up here at the top left. And from here, if it's not showing, so it is showing for me, it says travel profile right here. But if for any reason you're not showing this preview screen, just know there's a little arrow right here. And if you click that, then you can get to the full list of options. And then from there, you'll see that one of them is travel profile. So you're going to go ahead and click that one. And so mine does say copy of travel profile. The reason for that is it knows that I've done this before. So I've done this training, and then it knows that I've done this before. But for the title, essentially all you need to do is just go ahead and leave it as travel profile for so-and-so. And so who we're going to pretend to be doing an expense report for is one of my colleagues, Robert Lee. So we're going to pretend that he went on a conference down to San Diego. And so to start, we're going to be building the travel profile for Robert. And so I'm going to go ahead and change this to travel profile for Robert Lee. The next thing you're going to need to do is find that employee in the directory. And so I did mention before, the only people that you can make a travel profile for would be anybody who is active in UW payroll. And so the same goes for when you're entering an expense report who actually shows up in the Ariba directory. It's going to be only those that are active UW employees. It doesn't mean that we can't reimburse other types of travelers. It's just the only people that can approve electronically within the system and be synced up with the system are those that are active UW employees. And we'll kind of touch on the expense report module, sort of what those other traveler types are and how to select that and everything like that. But for doing the travel profile, just know it's going to be, you can only do this for an active UW employee. And so it's defaulting to show my name. So Kelly McGarry, that's myself. But what you'll need to do to find the person is come to this arrow right here. You'll also see on my screen that there are a few options saved at this point as well. Just know that that is something that Ariba does naturally. So Ariba does actually know how to track your work as you go. So if you're ever working on something and you see this drop down, that just means that Ariba recognizes you've entered it before. And if it is something that you've already entered, that you can go ahead and select it. But for training purposes, I'm going to show you as if that isn't there. So how to find it. But what you'll need to do is come to this search for more button at the bottom. Okay. And this is where you're going to go to search to find that employee. So there's a couple different ways you can do it. If you come to this drop down right here, the two kind of main ones you could go off of our name or email address. We actually usually recommend searching by the email address. The reason for that is there are lots of employees at UW. And because of that, it can be kind of tricky to find someone by the name. Another issue that we've seen is departments trying to reimburse the incorrect traveler. We have a lot of people that share the same first and last name, or if they don't share the exact same name, maybe they're very, very similar. There's close to 58,000 employees at UW. And so as you can imagine, because of that, there's lots of repeat names that are very similar. So to avoid that issue, we always recommend going by the email address. What the problem is, though, you're seeing it says Ariba dev at uw.edu. The site that I'm using right now is a training site. It's called eval. We use it for training purposes and things like that. And because of that, it is not properly linked to the emails at this section. And so that's why it looks a little bit quirky on my screen. But when you get to the production version of the website, when you enter it and you search by the email, it should come right up. And so because of that, I'm going to go ahead and search by the name for this one, just because Ariba Dev is the email for everybody in there, just to make sure that we isolate to the right person. If I type in Robert J. Lee, this is it right here. Okay. The next thing it's going to ask you for is home address and duty station. And you'll notice in parentheses it says city/state. All we are looking for here is just the city and the state of that traveler's home address and duty station. So one thing I see people do is list out, the entire home address. That is not necessary. Please make sure that you are just putting the city and the state for these two things. So for home address, Renton, or Robert actually lives in Renton. Put Renton, Washington. And then if they work here on Seattle campus, that would just be Seattle, Washington. So Robert here works here on Seattle campus, so that would just be Seattle. The next thing it's going to ask for is how that traveler likes to be paid. So this is something that kind of like home address and duty station, something that remains pretty constant. So the travel profile is kind of building these things that remain constant for a traveler. That way you don't have to go in there and make the changes each time. But for the most part, travelers or employees are probably going to want to get direct deposit. But if you are setting up this travel profile, just make sure you confirm with them that, in fact, they have direct deposit set up, and that's how they would like to be paid. We do have other payment options, but I'm going to touch on those when we get to later in the class. When we go to finalize the expense report, I'm going to take a second to walk through some of those other payment types. The other thing you'll notice is it's going to ask you for a UW box number. And the reason it does that is it's actually there as a backup. So when you get to the expense report, this is something you do actually have to fill out. And the reason it's asking you for it is if anything goes wrong on the direct deposit end, so let's say the direct deposit fails on the university's end, what happens is the system actually automatically mails a check to that box number. So if you have any travelers who mysteriously receive a check and they thought it was a direct deposit, there's a chance that the direct deposit failed for some reason, and because of that, the traveler received a check instead. I will say this happens on very rare occasion. People usually don't make changes to their accounts; things go right through. So it is something that happens pretty rarely. But just know systematically that's why it's asking for that box number. So I would make sure to put something accurate there. And I'm just going to put 354967, which is the box number from our floor, just as an example. Once we get to this point, then you just click next. You can click this top one or the bottom one. On this screen, it says preferences, but this is actually not anything you can fill out. And it's a little quirky, but at this point, you just click next again. And when we get to here, the last thing you'll see, there is a comment box. What that could be used for is if you were to put anything here, what's going to happen is it's going to put that same comment for that traveler on every expense report. It's not something I really use when I used to do expense reports, but there could be a need out there on campus. So just systematically so you know, that's what that comment box is for. If you find yourself making the same comment every time for the same traveler, that could be beneficial. But once you get to here, then you click the submit button at the top right. And once we get to here, it'll say the travel profile has been submitted for approval. It doesn't actually have to get approved. It gets approved automatically. So when you see this, just know that it went through. And then when you go to do an expense report, it should be auto-populating that information in the expense report, essentially effective immediately after you see this screen. All right, so that's the travel profile. Now we're going to head back to the travel dashboard, and to do that, so anytime you want to get sort of back to that main home screen that we're on, so let's say you're in procurement, you're purchasing supplies, something like that, but now you're ready to get back to travel. Just to get back there, you're just always going to click this tab here at the top where it says travel, and so that brings you back to the travel dashboard where we started. Alrighty, the next thing we're going to take a look at is an actual expense report. So this is where you're going to go to do an actual travel reimbursement. And to do that, you're going to click the create button here at the top left, create and then expense report. And again, if you're not seeing it, make sure you click these arrows and then come to expense report. And so now we're taking a look at the actual expense report module. One thing to highlight at this point, something that's important to know about, as you're learning this module is this number up here, which we refer to as the ER number, or you may hear it as expense report number, ER number, something like that, or ER. And so ER is short for expense report. And what's important about this number is it is going to be the report's unique identifier, and it's just the easiest way to track down the report and find information about it. So if you ever are contacting our office, or if you're just working on it with somebody within your own office and you're trying to track down the report, it's the easiest way for us or for them to be able to search and to locate what you're talking about. And so just systematically and or as a new user, it's just good to know what that number is. And so once we're at this point, there's kind of a few different ways you could always go about completing an expense report, but this is sort of the sort of flow of which I learned and did it. And so you don't necessarily have to follow this exact flow, but this is kind of the sort of general sort of standard way that what people would be approaching it. And so what we're going to start with is what's referred to as the summary section. The summary section actually lives in two different places on the expense report, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So if you click this little triangle over here where it says summary, and there's a little triangle button with a plus, you'll notice this summary section will populate right here. Excuse me. And I'm going to type just a few letters in purpose of trip. And then if I come over here to the continue button, now you'll notice that that same summary section is appearing right here. And when I typed the letter A, it was doing it here as well. So I just like to point that out because even though it is in two different places, it does not mean you need to do it twice. So it'll be kind of personal preference whether you prefer to do it on that screen or if you prefer to wait on this screen. And these are kind of the two main screens that you'll be working out on the module. So I'll just kind of show you again what I'm talking about. So if I go to items and then continue, these are sort of your kind of back and forth two screens that we're going to be working out of today. Okay. But I'm going to do the summary on this first screen, which we started on. So I'm going to go ahead and expand this. One thing that's good to know about the module is it is a web-based platform. And so it's not like a software you need to download to your computer. So you'll notice what I'm working out of right now is Google Chrome. We actually do recommend using Google Chrome. It does work on other browsers, such as Internet Explorer and such. But Google Chrome has proven to be sort of the least buggy and what I've been using for several years and hardly run into any sort of issues. The one that I've seen some issues on is Mozilla Firefox. So if you're a Firefox user, just be a little leery there. You could run into some issues. Some things that I've seen are like buttons not appearing and things of that nature. So I'd highly recommend if you're a Firefox user that you go ahead and switch over to Google Chrome, specifically for Ariba. And it just has to do with how Ariba like supports web-based platform. They keep everything perfectly up to date with Chrome, whereas other browsers may fall short. So just something to keep in mind that I hadn't mentioned yet. Another thing too, since it's a web-based platform, one thing it also does do, which is nice, is it does save your work as you go. So if your computer crashes or you close the browser accidentally, it should still have your work saved. I don't know exactly what the timer is. If I were to guess, it's every 30 seconds or a minute or so. So whatever you were working on should be there. Let's go ahead and get back into it. So with the summary section, the first thing it's going to ask you for is a trip name. And so mine is saying untitled expense report right now. And for the trip name, we don't have any compliance that says you need to put anything specific here. But we do have some general guidance, and that is just to be more detailed than not. And so I'm going to go ahead and just give an example. But another thing to keep in mind is that we do see is a lot of departments will have a naming convention. So if your finance manager or administrator has something specific that they want you to put here, just always be mindful of that. And if that's the case, then please go ahead and do that. But if it is left up to you or the department, whoever's working on it, just go ahead and be more detailed than not. And kind of some things you want to highlight is what would be like key criteria to like uniquely identify that trip. Um, so for example, like the traveler's name, maybe what the trip was, if it was a conference, what was the name of the conference, where were they going, maybe like what was the funding that was paying for it, things of that nature. Just thinking about like what an auditor may want to see. We will say. Right. So for my example, very generic, sort of kind of making up a trip. We don't have anything too detailed, but for mine, I just put traveler name, the name of the conference. We're just going to pretend it was called San Diego Conference, the dates of travel for business, and then that last thing is going to be the budget number that we're using to pay for the expenses. So just a very general example, but again, just kind of think about what an auditor would want to see, keep it nice and detailed, and make it very clear about what the trip was. The next thing is type of traveler. So it's going to default to say UW employee. Just know that our module can support other types of travelers. So I'll go ahead and show you the drop down. UW employee, UW student employee, I kind of pretty much see as the same thing, but the only real difference there is it would be a student and they're also an employee. The next one is going to be UW student. So that would be they're a student, but they're not an employee. And the last one would be non-UW, which is kind of the sort of the catch-all. Since our funding is very diverse, we do actually support a lot of people who are non-UW. And the last one is faculty staff candidate. What we're talking about there is travel related to interview expenses. So if you have somebody coming in for a department, they're a candidate for a position, and you're paying for their airfare and per diem, stuff like that. That's what we're referring to as faculty staff candidate. But since Robert's an employee, we're gonna keep that as employee. And this next part, we're going to enter the traveler claimant, and this is the exact same thing that we had looked at before with the travel profile. So as far as entering somebody out of the directory, it's going to be only those that are active employees. And to find them, we're going to essentially did what we had already done before. So click the arrow, search for more. And again, before, like I mentioned, we always recommend going by the email address. The only difference here is it says UW Net ID and email address. So when you do the search on this part, just make sure that you leave out the @uw.edu and that you just search the UW Net ID. But very similar, just search it by the email or the Net ID. We still recommend going by the UW Net ID. So this part of the module is actually properly linked to the email. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what that would look like the proper way this time. So Robert's UW Net ID is RJ Lee 10. And then, so when you search by the net ID, it comes right up. But Robert Lee is a good example too. I'll show you why searching by the name can be kind of tricky. If I just search last name Lee, you'll notice that tons of people have Lee just in their name. And so I'd have to scroll down to R and it would take a long time. There could be other people with, Robert Lee, the same name as well. And I believe there are a few other people with Robert Lee. So just again, keeping in mind, searching by the net ID is always going to be best. Okay. And then once here, you just kind of double check, okay, RJ Lee 10, that's the right person, click select. The next question is claiming expenses on behalf of another. It's a yes or no question. What we're talking about here is when a traveler is purchasing expense for somebody else that isn't their own, but it's eligible for reimbursement. So for example, let's say I was traveling with Robert to this same conference, but Robert had paid for 2 nights of my lodging. Let's say maybe I forgot my credit card, something like that. We're on the same trip. And so because of that, Robert had covered those 2 nights of lodging. How the compliance works is reimbursement would always go to the traveler who actually paid the expense. So since I didn't actually pay for those nights, I wouldn't get reimbursed. So we got to reimburse Robert for it. But how we document the fact that it was, paid for me as opposed to just Robert paying for himself, like that would be the usual case. That's what this question is built in for, is identifying that. And what it does is if you click yes and you see this little info box, it wants you to list the name, purpose of trip, duty station of additional travelers. So essentially, you'd be putting my information, verifying that I was on UW business, that I was eligible for that lodging, is essentially what you'd be proving in this box. But we're not going to do that on this expense report. I just wanted to highlight what that question was, and if you run into it, that's what that's there for. But for this reimbursement, we're going to pretend that he actually didn't pay for anybody else. Claiming expenses related to relocation. This was implemented due to a big tax change that happened at the beginning of 2018. There used to be certain travel expenses related to relocation that could be reimbursed through us, but they are now considered taxable, and because of that, the expense report module is no longer able to support that type of reimbursement. So when you click yes, it's just going to guide you to a link and give you a little backstory and give you more information on how to properly reimburse, or how to actually reimburse for travel related relocation now. So when you see that question, that's what that's related to. Travel related relocation, you should be going somewhere else. That's kind of what that's telling you. Personal time taken. So we have travelers that mix business with personal. As far as personal time, we get into a lot more detail in the other class. So travel policies and procedures, definitely keep an eye out for that. Also, if you're curious just about personal time, we do have a page on our website. And this link does bring you there, and that kind of highlights what the compliance is, the documentation requirements, and everything like that. But once you've kind of taken care of everything like that and you're on the expense report, what you would enter is yes for personal time, and then you're going to enter the personal time location and personal time dates, and then also keeping in mind, prorating and the comparison airfare that comes from the compliance. But systematically, all you're going to be entering is personal time location and the personal time dates. But for this expense report, we're not going to have any personal time, but just pointing out what that question is there for. The purpose of trip, the guidance is very similar to what I was saying with the trip name. So again, there's no compliance that says you need to say specifically this here. But again, just keeping in mind what an auditor would be looking for. But in a purpose of trip section, you really want to highlight really what the trip was, what the benefit to the university or to the university funding was. That's kind of something an auditor would be looking for. But the one I'm going to do is very kind of vague and generic, but just keep in mind, you'll want to be nice and detailed, just really proving, what the benefit of this trip was. So mine's very generic. San Diego Conference for Professional Development. Obviously, a lot of the ones you'd be seeing out there would have a lot more detail than that, but we're just kind of doing a vague, made-up trip, so that's why it sounds like that. Okay, and the next thing it's going to ask for is business location. Super self-explanatory. Just make sure you provide the location, and for this trip, we're just going to say it was San Diego. Business dates, also self-explanatory. So you will just be entering the business dates associated with the trip, and our made-up dates are going to be June 3rd through 5th of 2019. So below here, what receipts are required. So this is just going to bring you to our receipt page. What I didn't mention, which I also will highlight a little bit or show in more detail towards the end, is all of our official policy information lives on the website. So that's why you'll see kind of these links embedded in to get to our official policy documentation. It's on our website. So that's what these links that are embedded in there for. They're going to bring you to our actual compliance. If you're ever looking for what those receipts and just what our compliance is in general, that's what those are for. It's just bringing you to our website. This next part, privacy notice. So this is in relation to EU GDPR. This is actually something that comes from the UW Privacy Office. It's regarding those that reside within the EU. At this point, I wouldn't worry about it too much as prepare. This is just something that's in there as a notice, but this link brings you to the UW Privacy Office page. So you'll just want to make sure you're aware of what that is. Your department should already be sort of aware of that and kind of following the guidelines that are there. But as prepare, when you get to this point, just kind of know what that is. Comes from the UW Privacy Office, has to do with collecting information from those that reside in the EU. And so since it's a reimbursement, we're collecting information. Just be aware of those requirements, and make sure you check out those resources if you're not aware of what that is. Okay. Once we get to here, then we are done with the summary section. And what you can do is you can always leave it open if you like, or you can collapse it. And so I'm going to collapse it just so we have a little bit more screen space to look at as we go. All right, and what we're going to do next is actually take a look at adding the items. And to do that is going to be in this section over here to the right is where you add all the different line items. So they are broken apart into categories. If there is ever anything on here that, or if you ever run into an expense that is not on this list, one thing to keep in mind, there's always the chance that it's something that's not reimbursable. But there's also the chance that maybe it's just supposed to go somewhere else. So just something to keep in mind. But if you're ever unsure or it feels a little bit off or you can't figure out where to enter something, we definitely recommend reaching out to our office and we can kind of help point you in the right direction or kind of tell you maybe if it is something quirky, maybe we've seen it before and we can help you get it entered in the right way. But the first one we're going to look at is airfare, which is under number 2, transportation. So if we click airfare, the first thing you'll see is this up here, paid by, and it's going to default to traveler. Just know that there are a few other options here, but what it means by paid by traveler, so you're going to leave this as paid by traveler probably 99% of the time. Essentially what that means is the traveler paid for it and we're reimbursing the traveler. So as you can imagine, that's going to be pretty much all of them that we run into. But there are a few other options here. The claimant one is in reference, I'm going to go back to the summary real quick, to this question right here, claiming expense on behalf of another. So to log it essentially properly in the system to indicate which expenses were for somebody else. So we're going back to that example of if Robert had paid for 2 nights of my lodging, if we had marked yes and then indicated, those were for me, when we go to enter those nights of lodging that were mine, then you would switch this to claim it. If it got left as traveler, it wouldn't be a huge deal. But it's just there as like an indicator is the best way to think about it. So that way, like when somebody's reviewing the different line items and looking at all the expenses, they can see, oh, those 2 were marked as claimant. What the preparer is saying is, oh, those 2 were for somebody else. So just so you know, that's what that's there for. Another one is CTA, or short for Central Travel Account. What the Central Travel Account is a ghost credit card. Essentially what a ghost credit card is it's basically a credit card payment information, but a physical card isn't actually issued to the department. It's just, like buying power and actual like credit card information to be able to purchase for travel. And the CTA accounts are actually reconciled in another system called PaymentNet. And so all of that is actually separate from the expense report module. What this is here for is it's an optional tool for departments to be able to log CTA expenses on the expense report. And what it'll do is it won't pay the traveler for any of those that you log, because what you're saying is that this was purchased on department ghost card. Obviously we wouldn't want to reimburse Robert for it because he didn't actually pay with his personal funds, but it's a way of including those expenses just all together to consolidate the information. One thing I've been asked is, oh, can you do this instead of like PaymentNet? The answer is no. So you need to make sure you follow all the card services guidelines, procedures, doing all that. This is just an optional tool. So a lot of departments see it as like additional work, but sometimes the additional work is worth it to keep all the information, consolidated. So it kind of depends on what you're doing, and you'll just want to check on with your finance team to see if that's something they want you to do or if it's something that they've been doing. And then the other ER is another kind of optional tool. This one also doesn't pay the traveler. And what it's saying is this expense that you're logging, was already paid on another expense report. So, for example, let's say Robert had already been reimbursed for airfare prior to the trip, and now we're going to reimburse his meals and his, Uber expenses and lodging, stuff like that. This is a way that you could say, oh, okay, here's that expense that we had already paid for previously, just to help consolidate the information. So obviously, since we had already reimbursed them, we don't want to reimburse them again, but it's just a way of bringing the information together. Okay. So a little background on what those are. So the CTA, other ER, definitely optional tools. Claim it to shows for somebody else, and then for the most part, you're reimbursing somebody who just pay for their own expense, and you're reimbursing them. So that's what I mean when that's going to be 95% of the time it's going to stay like that. Okay. The next thing you'll see is currency exchange rates. So just so you know, the Ariba software, the Ariba platform only recognizes US dollars. So if you run into any foreign currencies, um, it will need to be converted to US dollars because the system doesn't know how to do the conversion for you. This link will link out to a site called oanda.com. And if you go to our receipt page, it also has information about, doing currency conversion and the recommended ways to document it. But just know systematically, if it's not in US dollars, it has to be converted. And then once it has been converted and documented, then you go to enter the US dollar amount. So that's why you'll see the currency exchange stuff kind of embedded in each of the line items. The next thing is description. This is a free text box. It is going to default to whatever the name of the line item is. So here, let me get this stuff out of the way. And so since we're doing an airfare, it's going to default to say airfare. But you'll see over here also, this is where that information changes. And so I do see some people make changes to this. You can, say airfare and then maybe give more information about what the route was and stuff like that. I do see people do it, but just know systematically it just defaults to say airfare. It's a free text box, and if you do change it, it'll change the information over here under description. The next thing it's going to ask you for is travel destination. Your 3 options are in-state, out-of-state, foreign, Hawaii, and Alaska. For us, since it's San Diego, that's going to be out-of-state for sure. In-state, what we're talking about is within the state of Washington. So if the traveler had flew from Seattle to Bellingham, or Seattle to Spokane, something like that, that would be considered in-state. But if it's like Seattle, but then they're leaving the state of Washington, then that is considered out-of-state. And then the last one is foreign, Hawaii, and Alaska. But since we're San Diego, we're going to go ahead and leave us San Diego. And the next thing is entering the flight details. And by flight details, what we're talking about is the actual legs of the flight. So the airports they're flying in and out of, the class of flight they flew, and stuff of that nature. And that'll make more sense when we get in there. Flight details right here. And so to add the legs, you're going to click the add button. And so origin, what we're talking about is the airport that they would have been flying out of. So if I click this arrow and then search for more, again, you'll see that it's tracking some that I've entered already. But if we go to search for more, generally you'll just be searching by the city. But if you get snazzy with the airport codes, you can always search by that as well. But if I type in Seattle, once you get to this point, there may be multiple airports in in that same area. Just make sure you pick which one that they actually flew out of. We do require a flight itinerary for reimbursement. So when you get to this point, you're doing the reimbursement, you should have that information readily available. So if you check the itinerary, just check what airport they're flying out of, and you'll select it that way. But Seattle Tacoma International is the main airport in Seattle, so that would be most likely what they'd be flying out of. Destination, same thing, arrow, search for more. And we're going to say San Diego. And then for San Diego, SAN is the main one, Lindbergh Field. For departure date, again, that should be coming right from the itinerary, but you're just going to come to this calendar button right here. And we're just going back several months. We're going to say it was from June, so June 3rd, like we had mentioned in the trip name. The next thing it's going to ask you for is the departure time. It's going to default to 12 a.m., but if you have the departure time from the itinerary, you would just go ahead and enter that there. One thing I do say is if you want to go ahead and just leave it as 12 a.m., we actually do generally say in our guidance that it's okay to go ahead and do so. The reason for that is the times are departure time is always changing by the minute. You're already going to be attaching the itinerary as is. So if you want to leave it as 12 a.m., you're welcome to do so. We do say that in our class usually. But if you have the departure time, you can always change it as well. And then the next thing is airline. And this is a free text box. You're just going to put whatever airline. We're just going to pretend that Robert flew Alaska for this. And one important part next is the class. So it's going to ask you for what class they flew. This comes from our compliance. Anything above a coach class does require approval. And so when you get to this point, if it's anything above coach, do make sure you are marking that accordingly. And then it's going to ask you to provide a justification. So this stuff kind of comes from our compliance. If you haven't done airfare upgrades before, just make sure you check out our airfare page, go to the approval section and figure out all those different requirements. And that'll make a lot more sense. But systematically, but just make sure you're matching it up to the class, and then you are providing justification and attaching the approvals and everything like that. But when it's coach, since we don't require justification, you just go coach, no justification required. All right. And so this next part, I'm going to go a little bit quicker. I'm just going to go do the reverse. So since you've already seen it, now you can kind of watch me go through quick how we'd enter the second leg. So now we're just going to do kind of the same thing, but backwards. So again, search at San Diego. And then from this one, I'll go ahead and just use my one that's already saved. Departure date. So we're going to say it was based on our trip. It was June 5th. And the airline will just say it was Alaska again, and no justification required. Okay. The next thing it's going to ask for. So if you ever need to make changes to those flight details, so let's say, oh, oops, I realized I entered the wrong date. You just come to this flight details button, and it'll bring you right back to that same menu. The next box is airfare. This is going to be the total. So just go ahead and include whatever the total was, including the mandatory fees and taxes, everything like that. And we're just going to make up an amount and say it was $200. Agency fee you'll see on a few line items. That is in reference to using a travel agency. A lot of times they will charge a fee for their services. Generally, they're booking airfare or hotel or car rental. So you'll see it embedded into those three line items. If they do charge a fee, you can go ahead and include it. We'll go ahead and pretend that there was a $9 booking fee. The next box is change fee. So there is compliance that manages this. You'll see this link right here, change cancellation fees. Just know that there is compliance that manages whether a change fee is reimbursable. But if it's been determined to be reimbursable, you can enter the amount here. And then what it's going to do is it's going to ask you or it's going to have you click one of these drop downs. And this comes from the compliance. Again, just make sure you review that information before you select one, make sure that's appropriate. And that the department will be approving it and all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to go ahead and remove it just to keep everything clean. Okay. Next thing you'll see in each of the line items is account code. So in some of the other modules, you'll notice, or in other things that you do at the university, that you are doing this coding yourself. What account code means, you may hear it called something differently. It's generally called an object code at the University of Washington, but I've heard it called account codes and other things as well. But if you go to like the financial reporting website, they're generally calling it an object code. And so this has to do with essentially where this type of expense is getting coded to in the accounting. But for eTravel, for our module, it is all automatic. So it's just based on the type of line item you select or like the bubble you select within that line item. And so it knows because this is airfare and you select out of state, it's going to code it as out of state airfare. But just know, as far as the accounting, how the coding works, that's how the module works. It codes it automatically based on what stuff you're entering. And then this part, the accounting, What that is referring to, how we refer to it as is budget numbers. So what you're going to be doing is on this edit button, this is where you can enter the budget information. There's actually two different ways you can enter the budget information. You'll see this budget right here. This is where you enter the budget number, but you'll also see this. So there's this edit button right here, which will allow you to enter the budget just to this one airfare line item. But there is also a functionality called mass edit, in which you can actually add the budget information to multiple line items at the same time. And so what I recommend in my class is to wait until the end and then just go ahead and do the mass edit. The reason for that is you can save time. Instead of entering it each time on each line item, you just go ahead and build all the expenses, wait till the end, click mass edit, and then apply the budget number to everything. You may be wondering, why is there both options? The reason for that is sometimes the mass edit can't do what you're trying to do. For example, let's say you want one budget number to pay for the meals, one to pay for the airfare, and another one to pay for like the car rental, something like that. The mass edit function wouldn't know how to handle that situation. So in that case, if you need to do like individual like budgeting, stuff like that, assigning a certain amount to this line item and then to that line item, that kind of thing, then generally, yeah, you would want to go, or you may have to go by each line item. But the mass edit can do, again, apply the same budget number to everything, or it can apply multiple budget numbers, but based on a percentage. So let's say you want, one budget to pay for 50% of the entire report and another budget to pay for 50% of the report, then the mass edit function could actually do that. But if you only want one budget to pay for airfare and then one to pay for like meal per diem, for example, the mass edit would get confused. It doesn't know how to do that. So, but I'm going to go ahead and wait until the mass edit at the end, because the functionality between this and that is the exact same. So that's why I'm going to go ahead and hold off until we get to that one. It looks the exact same. Okay, and once we get to here, you're going to click done. Also, once you've completed a line item, if you ever need to come back to that line item to make changes, what you do is come over here, and you'll see my cursor. If I click and it turns yellow, that means that those are the details that are highlighted. So if you come over and then you come over here, then I can always come back in and make those changes. So as we start to build line items, that's how you kind of navigate between the different ones. When it turns yellow, that means it's over here and you can go make the changes to it again. So I'm going to come over here to add item and do our next one. So next we're going to take a look at per diems. And let's go ahead and start with lodging per diem, which is under number 3, lodging. Also, since we've seen some certain things as we go through, I'm going to go just kind of quickly pass through things that we've already touched on. So you'll notice this is a good example. So this top part is going to be what we've already seen before. So the pay by currency exchange. So keep in mind those can change to claim it. That we're converting to US dollars and that sort of thing. But this part, in-state, out-of-state, for Hawaii and Alaska, so those bubbles are the same, but there's one thing I like to highlight for as far as per diem. Do make sure you get those bubbles select, because when you go to search for the per diem list, those lists populate based on what bubble you select. So if I have this set to in-state and then I tried to go find San Diego, it actually wouldn't come up, because in-state is only for within the state of Washington. So I wouldn't be able to find San Diego per diem because I have this in-state bubble selected. So you should be getting it anyways, but if you're ever having trouble trying to find the per diem and like this location is not coming up at all and it's confusing, come back to these bubbles and make sure that the appropriate one's selected. But the first thing we're going to do is this location where we need to come here to select, and we're going to determine what our per diem. Just a little background on per diem, if you are unfamiliar with how per diem works at the university. I highly recommend reviewing our per diem pages for all the details on our website, and we go into definitely more detail in the other class. But just a little background. So the way I think of per diem is the reason that we go off per diem is we are a state agency. So you'll notice a lot of government agencies, they run on like the per diem system. And how we treat it at UW is, for lodging, the best way to think of it is like a cap for the business location that you're going. So essentially, our travelers are supposed to spend at or below that per diem rate. And then if they go over, we do have exceptions to that can be met and documented in certain circumstances. But in general, our travelers should be at per diem or below. So that's why I think, but in general, they're paying for themselves, seeking reimbursement, but then they're just subject to that cap. And obviously, if you are traveling to like downtown New York versus like maybe like a small town in Washington, the per diem becomes more forgiving based on where you're traveling to. So you'll notice, certain places have you get a lot more money that you could spend because it's just a higher cost to be there. And then per diem also comes into play for meals. So per diem just pertains to lodging reimbursement and meal reimbursement. And the difference with meals is we think of meal per diem as an allowance. The reason for that is as opposed to a cap, because we actually don't require receipts for meals, which comes from our compliance. So, and we're actually doing that based on start and end times of what's called travel status. And so based on, like when you left for work, when you got back for work, will determine what your allowance is. So that's why it's a little bit different than a cap, because you're not like turning in a receipt to figure out if you were within per diem. It's just you were traveling from this time. This is the per diem for that location. Here's the allowance that you get based on that. So just a little background, just so you're a little bit familiar of how the per diems work. But let's go ahead and keep moving on this lodging line item. So what we're going to do now is find the per diem rate. And what you need to do is you're going to be matching you're actually going to be matching the dates, using those dates to determine what the appropriate per diem rate is. So if I click the select button right here, and our location of business is San Diego, so that's where we're going to be looking. And generally, for the most part, you're probably going to be searching by city, but just know there are some other search options. The other ones that I find useful are state/country, and maybe search it by the county. But you can always go by the state or something like that, and then or search it by the city. But for domestic travel, usually search it by the city makes the most sense. One thing I do recommend is sorting by the effective date. So you'll see you can actually click these columns up here. So if I click that, it'll sort by city. If I come over here to effective date, you'll want that little arrow to be pointing down. That'll bring the most recent ones to the top. So the reason I like sorting by the effective date is it brings the more recent ones to the top. And the per diems, only update once a year. And so generally you're going to be doing something, probably within the last few weeks or maybe a couple months. There are definitely circumstances where you may be reimbursing something older than that, but generally, for the most part, what's going on out there is something more recent than a year. So that's why it makes the most sense to go ahead and bring the more recent things to the top. But there's a few things to keep in mind when you're searching per diem. So the first thing you need to make sure is to get the city and the state combo correct. So you'll notice San Diego is a good example because there's a San Diego in Texas. So just keep in mind that city may be in other locations, and that could affect what the per diem is. So just make sure that you are selecting the right city and state combo. Also, how domestic per diems work is they're actually by county as opposed to city. So generally, like it's just whatever cities were in that county, that county just has the same per diem. So that's why you'll see like San Diego County. So you're kind of welcome to go based on like the county that city's in, or on based on the city. It's up to you because it's essentially the same thing. But what we need to do is take those dates and we need to find the rate that is both effective and within season start and season end. So some rates don't have seasonality, so you'll just see like January through December, whereas others have seasonality saying like, certain prices will be more expensive to be here, during the summer as opposed to the fall. So that's why you see there's some that have this season start and season end. But what we're going to do, so our dates were June 3rd through 5th of 2019. So that's the dates that we're going off of. We need to make sure we need to find the rate in which those actually are relative to. So again, city and state combo. So we can see our San Diego's are over here. And the first thing is the date should fall within the effective date and expiration. So essentially my dates of travel should come after that effective date, and it should come before it expires. And so June 3rd, 5th of 2019, it is definitely going to be one of these ones. So you'll see October 1st, 2018 to September 30th, 2019, but you'll notice that there's quite a few of them. The reason there's quite a few of them is now, okay, there's additional layer, and that's the seasonality. So I know these all look like they can be right, but there's multiple of them. So which one is it? So now I need to match, okay, which one which one has where my dates fall in as far as season start and season end. And so that's how I arrive at this one being the correct one. So June 3rd, 2019, that comes after October 1st, 2018. It comes before September 30th, 2019, so it's within that range. And then it comes after January 1st, and it comes before July 31st. So that's kind of the sort of flow as far as finding the per diem. One thing that is cool about the system is it does actually know if your dates don't match this. So it'll actually give you like an error saying, oh, go back, your dates don't match. But the one thing it won't check for is the city and the state combo. So it doesn't know whether you got that wrong, but it does know how to match dates versus this. So if you do get it wrong for any reason, it'll just tell you to go back and make the adjustment. But to avoid getting to that point, that's the sort of criteria you do to find the right one. And once you do, you just click the select button over here to the right. Next, it's going to ask you for is the check-in and checkout date, and that will just should be just coming straight from the lodging folio. So kind of like airfare itinerary, people are generally going to be turning in a lodging folio, so you should see that information here. But from our made up dates, we're just going to reference those. So June 3rd. Oops. Looks like I misclicked. There we go. Oh. All right, there we go. Agency fee. So we've already seen that before. Again, related to travel agencies, they charge fees for booking lodging. If that's the case, you can put the fee here. And then the next thing you're going to do is enter the daily rate. So generally, be entering the per diem or the same as per diem or below. I will show you real quick what happens if it's over per diem. And then for the daily taxes, so make sure you separate that out. Put the daily taxes here. But I just want to show you when you do enter a daily rate that's higher and then you go to click done, it is going to ask you for the justification. So this comes from our exceptions to lodging per diem compliance. You'll notice this drop down. So if you do run into something that's over per diem, just keep in mind that there's compliance related to that. You'll want to review our lodging page, especially the exceptions to per diem section, and that will highlight what the exceptions are, how to document them, and everything like that. But I'm going to go back and I'm going to set this to per diem just to keep the report clean. And then cancellation fee, this is the exact same as when we were in our airfare line item. Change fee, the same exact compliance relates to it. It's just our change/cancellation of travel plans policy. If there was, ever a situation in which they had to cancel lodging and a fee was incurred and stuff like that, it's the same compliance. Just make sure you mention the amount here that it is compliant, it is reimbursable, and it's going to prompt that drop down, and you're going to select one of those reasons again. So we'd already seen it before, but just highlighting that's the same functionalities there too. Override amount. So we haven't seen this before. What the override function does is it will reduce any flat value you have on that line item down to whatever value you want it to be at. So you'll see this lodging per diem line item. It says that, based on what we entered, it's going to give them $388. What the override will do is if I put in 100 here, now you'll see the total will change to 100. So it's a way of, keeping everything in sync with the receipt and keeping everything lined up. What you can do is use the override amount to say, oh, okay, we don't want to pay the traveler 388 for this line item. We just want to give them 100, but we want, everything on the line item to sync up so it's not confusing. That's essentially what the override function is. You may be wondering, why would you ever want to reduce it down? So sometimes there's, funding restrictions, or maybe someone got like a scholarship that just says, they only get $100 for lodging. That way you can actually, match up to everything to what was incurred and then use the override. And that way, based on, that scholarship or whatever the funding restriction is, we're just giving them 100 as opposed to the 388. And you'll see the override function in a few line items. It's usually where there's like some math involved, because having to manipulate the math, or it would just make the report kind of clunky and quirky and stuff like that. So that's what the override is there for. It's for reducing a value down. It will never let you override over. It's just for reducing it down to a certain amount. Okay. And I'll go ahead and just leave the override on there. It's not a big deal. Okay. Let's go ahead and jump into meal per diem. So meal per diem is very similar, just with a couple distinct differences. And so we'll point those out. And so again, this stuff looks the same. Again, travel destination, make sure you get the right bubble. It's going to populate the list based on which one you select. But let's go ahead and go back into selecting the per diem. And we're going to follow basically the same thing. So again, sorting by the effective date. Mine remembers that I like that, so it just does it automatically. But if you don't see it, you just come here, click effective date, change the arrow to bottom. And the rate, like before, is going to be the same one again. So again, June 3rd through 5th comes within the effective date expiration, and it's within January 1 to July 31, and then San Diego, California is the right city-state combo. So this part is a little bit different. So it's going to ask for a start date and an end date. That will be what we've already determined. But what's different is it's going to ask you for a start time and an end time. This is something that, again, sort of comes from our compliance, but because we treat meal per diem like an allowance. So with lodging, receipts can be turned in, you're going to be entering the amount. With meals, it's much different. It's determining what their start and their end time was for travel, what's called travel status. And for this part, you'll want to check with your department on how they're determining these start and end times for travelers. I see it get done in all kinds of different ways on campus, so you just want to double check and see how this is being determined. But I'll see it like an email from the traveler saying what the time is. There are certain departments that go based on like flight times. And others, that use like a travel reimbursement form, and then the traveler indicates it on that form. And so because of that, it's different. But essentially how the compliance works is they're, eligible for per diem essentially when they leave from home, and then they go on the trip until when they return back to their home or their duty station is sort of like the window of when they can be reimbursed. And again, yeah, some departments will use like flight times. They'll put them in 3 hours before a domestic flight. They'll just start their meal per diem then, and then cut them off on when they get back on the arrival time. Or they'll give them 4 hours prior to an international flight to give them a little more room, because international travel is a little bit more complex. But again, just make sure you check with your department on those start and end times. And then if you go to our meals page, it goes over all the information about kind of what I was just mentioning about the compliance and, determining those times and everything like that. But we're just going to make up time since we don't have an itinerary to go off of. So we'll pretend that Robert left at 8 in the morning that first morning. And then just to keep it simple, we'll say 8 p.m. he came back on that final day. So at this point, though, you're getting those times either from the traveler or department. Just figure out, how you guys go about it. Were any meals provided by a conference or any other source? It's a yes/no question. So if you've ever been to a conference or supported conference travel, you'll notice, or just a lot of travel in general, that meals do typically a lot of times get provided. If that's the case, since we're not requiring receipts for meals, but what we do require is any meals that are provided, that those get zeroed out. So it's a little bit different than you may have seen, for other companies. So no receipts for meals. Any meals that were provided, those need to be zeroed out. And for any that were provided, you're going to mark yes. If none were provided, then that's easy. You just go ahead and click no. But at this point, you click yes. And we're just going to make one where we'll say that We're going to say that lunch was provided on 0604. Okay, and once we get to this point, then you're going to click the populate per diem button right here. So it's going to take our per diem rate, and based on these times and dates, it's going to now kind of build our allowance for us. And if you click populate per diem, and where it goes is right here, meal details. Alrighty. And so again, based on those dates and times, this is the allowance that gets built. And what you need to do as far as provided meals. So if no meals were provided, it just gets left blank, or it just gets left as is, and then we reimburse all the meals. But if any were provided, you need to come in here and zero those out. And to do that, it's these boxes right here under claimed amount. These are amounts that you can actually change. And so we had said that launch is provided on June 4th. So you come here, change it to 0. And there's also this kind of optional comment box over here where you can provide more information. If you don't put anything there, it would still let you go through. But I'll just put a little note to say conference provided. Just a little additional detail. And so once we get to here, one thing that's good to know also, so you'll see that this section kind of gets locked in now that we've gotten to this point. If you need to make any changes, so let's say, oh, 8 p.m. that was incorrect. I was supposed to put, 7 p.m. that day, something like that. You can go to here, edit details, and then it'll let you make the changes. And then once you're done, you just click populate per diem again. And since I done that, I remembered that it does reset this section. So if you did do that, it's going to make sure you come back in here and zero it out again. So I'm just going to go fix it back to where we had it before. All right. And so once you get to that point, then you will see the override button is there as well. So as you can imagine, trying to reduce that 192 to a flat value. So let's say you wanted that to only be 100, kind of like we did before. You'd have to come in here and manipulate all the meal details, which would be kind of a pain. So again, the override button is here, and you would just enter the amount, and then it'll reduce it down to that flat value. And once we get to here, we click done. But the way I'm presenting this information right now, I guess the done button's going to look cut off right here, but it would normally right by here. We just click done. Okay. And now we're going to go back to add items, and we're going to take a look at a couple more. Since we won't be going through every single one, just keep in mind again, if there's any that you that aren't showing up, you run a new expense, that you work with us, and we can help you get it in the right place. But we're going to touch on a couple more of the sort of main ones that people run into. So let's go ahead and jump into a car rental. So again, this stuff looks the same. But one question I like to highlight on this one is traveler is sole driver, yes or no? This comes from our compliance. Essentially what the compliance is all drivers on the rental agreement or the final rental agreement need to be on university business, or the whole thing is not reimbursable. So this is where if traveler is the sole driver, you just click yes. That's going to be like most of the time. But if there are multiple drivers on that car rental, make sure you mark no, and that you're providing additional information. Justification for non-sole driver. What we're asking for there is just verifying that any of the other drivers are on university business. That way, it's just determined that it is eligible for reimbursement. So one thing that we see like from time to time is like a traveler will add their spouse to the rental agreement. If that's the case, they're welcome to do so, but in that case, then it's now been kind of considered to be a personal expense as opposed to business. So just make sure your travelers are careful of that. But if there are additional drivers, you can mark no, and then you mark the additional information, or that the other drivers, and just verifying that they're on business. I can flip this back to the yes. And then the next part is pick up and drop off. So For car rental, we require a final rental agreement. So this information should be available. But we'll match it up to our dates that we have before. Car rental fee. So kind of like with the airfare, we just sort of put all the mandatory fees and taxes and the whatever the fee was, and we'll just pretend it was $100. And then agency fee. So for travel agents, they work with car rentals. And the last question I want to highlight is full size car smaller. This also comes from the compliance, which we allow up to a full size car without justification. Anything above a full size car does require justification. So what we're talking about is like renting a van or like a pickup truck or an SUV or something like that. In that case, that would require a justification. For example, like a group for like group travel, it may make a lot more sense to get a van as opposed to multiple full sizes, especially if it's like a coach or like professor, chaperoning students, stuff like that. So just keep in mind that's kind of what the compliance is, and then that's why this question is here. So if you're ever building an expense report and you're wondering what that question is for, just make sure that the car rental is full size or smaller, and if it is something higher, that it's being documented. If you do click no at the end, it's going to ask you for the other car type and then justification. If it's UW business, then make sure you provide the additional information on it. But I'm going to go ahead and flip this back to yes, and then click done. So that's it for car rental. Another thing I want to highlight is the mileage line item. So if you come down here, transportation mileage, what I like to highlight on this one is, what we're talking about with mileage is we're talking about reimbursing a traveler who drove their personal vehicle. To get more information on this, that would be on our ground transportation page. It highlights, what the allowable routes are and how to document mileage and everything like that. But systematically, I like to just kind of point out how it works a little bit. So you'll notice that there's this reimbursement rate right here that says 58 cents. And generally the mileage rate changes on January 1 of each year. So what I like to warn people systematically when they're doing this is to make sure that when they're entering that the year that they enter is correct. The reason I say that is I see a lot of people combining, multiple mileage onto one line item. But a mistake that I've seen people make is compiling like multiple mileage trips from 2018 and ones from 2019, and then just putting it on the same line item. You need to be careful that you don't do that because the mileage rate changes each year. So when you're entering this stuff, if you are compiling, just make sure that it's all within the same year. So that way that the reimbursement rate that you're giving them is what you're supposed to be giving them. So that reimbursement rate is based on like when the mileage actually occurred. So make sure that the dates and everything like that sync up. So that's specifically when you're compiling multiple onto one. But if you're just like doing just one route, you're here, just make sure you match up the date to when it actually occurred, and then you wouldn't run into that issue. But just something that I like to highlight. But other than that, it's very kind of straightforward, just date, and then enter the amount of miles, keep in mind our mileage policy, and attaching the proper documentation to prove the miles and everything like that. But let's say there was one trip on the 5th and it was 20 miles. So we'll just go ahead and enter that one on here. And then the override function is there again, also, trying to manipulate the miles to get the amount of mileage you want to give them. Something like that would be kind of tricky. Okay. And as far as line items, the last one that we are going to actually enter on this one is going to be car service. And I just like to give a little background on what the car service line item is, because it kind of encompasses quite a few things. As far as entering it, it's one of the more simple ones. It's just date and amount. It's basically as simple as the line items can get. But I just like to highlight or just talk about what car service is. So what we're talking about is essentially any service of paying for a driver to get from point A to point B. And so because there's so many different options out there, the line item's been left to just be kind of generic instead of creating a bunch of different line items for all the different options that are out there. So what we're talking about is like Uber, Lyft, and Yellow Cab, Taxi, Car to Go, and all this kind of crazy stuff. There's a bunch of different options and more are popping up kind of feels like, every year. So, but that's what the car service line item, a service, you're getting a car and you paid for like the driver to get you to point A to point B is what we're talking about as car service. So just kind of highlighting, what that is. I think the line item like a few years ago used to be taxi, but again, as you know, there's all these different choices. So your Ubers, Lyfts, everything like that is going to go on this one. One thing I also will say is because this one's so generic, so car service, as far as the description box, this is where I see people change the description box the most often. So this is kind of you can kind of take this away as like a useful like tip, I guess. So what I see people do is like Uber home to airport, stuff like that. And then now you'll see when like reviewers taking a look at it, it'll say Uber home to airport, and it may be, a little bit easier to read than, or easier to understand than, just car service on June 5th. Now I can see Uber home to airport. So that's kind of just like the use of the description box in general. This is as a reviewer, compliance approver, when you're coming in, this is the screen that you, this is what your kind of main screen you see when you're navigating. So when someone puts that, it's a little bit more clear what that car service was specifically. So if you feel like using that, you can, or it will stay as car service as the default. But let's go ahead and put a $20 one. We'll just say Uber. Okay. All right, so that's all we're going to do for the line items. And the next thing we're going to take a look at is entering the budget information. So like I mentioned before, we could have gone to this edit button down here, entered it for each line item, but we wanted to save some time and wait for this mass edit. So down over here, mass edit, I click that. Once you get to here, you just click OK. And so once you get to here, budget number. So if you click this arrow, again, it's keeping track of the ones I've already entered, but you just come to search for more. And then budget number is pretty straightforward. Budget numbers are all their own, unique code. So, and then if you're wondering, what budget you should be using, this is something you'll definitely want to, double check with either like the traveler or your finance administrator on what should be entered here. But generally, at this point, it's information that should have been given to you in some sort of way. But systematically, this is where you enter the budget, and we're going to use 143735. Once you get to this point, it's good to just double check what the name of the budget is. So obviously just double checking the number, just making sure you got that right, and then make sure the name makes sense. So just a good point to double check. But if you've already done that, then you just click select. And then we'll take just a quick peek at the split accounting as well if you click this. So I mentioned that you can split by multiple budgets, but based on a percentage. So if you come to here, this is where you can go to do that. And what you can do is add splits. So you can see I can add, now I'm entering all these different budgets in a line like that. And what you can do is allocate based on a percentage. So I could say, I could add a 4 split and I could go 25%, 25%, 25%, and 25%. Or, you could have just 2 and go 50 and stuff like that. So just taking a quick peek at split accounting. If you ever have any complex split accounting that you're trying to figure out, you can't figure it out, just go ahead and give us a call. We can kind of help walk you through this stuff. But just so you know, there is this functionality here as well. But I'm going to click cancel since we're not going to do it on this one. Task option and project code. So these are optional accounting codes. They are a form of cost accounting, and not every department does it. So that's why these are optional. So if you see this blank, that's actually probably normal. For the most part, departments don't even use these, but there are ones that do. So, but this information should have been given to you once you get to this point. But if you were given a task option or project code, this is where that information goes, is right here. But a lot of the time, it's just going to be left blank. And what you do next is click this next button. And then what you do next is click done. And once we get to this point, you'll see 143735 has been entered to each of the line items. So definitely another good double check. Just make sure that, what you thought it was going to do did happen. So you'll just look right here. Okay, I can see that's what I wanted to do. Now that budget's on all the expenses. All right. And once we get to this point, then we're actually done on this screen. And what you're going to do is click continue up here. All right. And so now we're going to see the summary. So if we didn't do the summary on that first screen, we need to complete it right here. But since we did it already, it recognizes that. And now continuing to the right, this is where our travel profile came in handy. So we'll see, since I had entered Robert J. Lee, it recognized that a travel profile had been entered. And so now you'll see over here that it populated all that information that we had originally done on the travel profile. So see, if you remember, we did Renton, Washington, Seattle, Washington, that we said yes for direct deposit, and then that the box number is 354967. So now you can see, okay, that's where you would save some time in the long run. If you're only doing one expense report for that, or maybe you're, two total, or like one a year, or one every, 3 years, that this person hardly ever travels. It probably won't save you a whole lot of time because you're just going to come in here and just type it out. And then that was your one time you had to do it for the year. But for someone who's traveling frequently, generally they're not moving a lot or changing their payment information. So it's nice to just have that information populate there. And I'd also mentioned that we would go over the other payment information. So it's recognized in direct deposit. Direct deposit is only available for those that are active employees. So as far as the UW directory, entering direct deposit will only be available for those that are in the directory. But what the other payment options are, so if I select no, then we can actually take a look at those. The main other one is going to be payment by check. And for check payment, we can do domestic or foreign. If you do domestic or foreign, super straightforward. It's going to ask you for the address, domestic or foreign. One thing I will point out, that one mistake I've seen people make is just know that the check printing and mailing is all automatic. So one thing I've seen is people will start to trail the address from here and then start putting it in the general comment box. Just make sure that you're not doing that, because as far as the mailing system and everything like that, it will not pick up any information over here. So if you put the street address and then you start putting the apartment name over here or something like that, that's not gonna print on the envelope, and it will not reflect anywhere in the delivery information. So just keep that in mind. As far as the address, make sure you're squeezing it all on here. And getting it all the information on this actual bar here, or else it will not make it into the actual delivery stuff. Okay. And then, so yeah, domestic foreign, it just changes kind of what it's asking for just slightly. And then UW box, what we're talking about is intercampus mail. So if you want to have something delivered to a box number, and what also comes along with that is the in care of box. So what the in care of box is, the check will always be printed out to the traveler and claimant. Obviously, that's who we're paying. But the envelope, you can change what's printed on the envelope. So where we see this gets used is if you're trying to intercept a check for the traveler. So let's say you have someone coming from out of town or something like that, but you just want the check to come to the department in your name, the envelope in your name. That way you can intercept it. You're welcome to do that. So it can come that way, that the envelope's printing your name, so it knows to be delivered to you. You intercept it, and then when you open it, the inside will have the check made out to whoever you put over here for the traveler claimant. So that's the functionality of that. If you leave it blank, so I do get asked, okay, what happens if I leave it blank? The envelope gets printed out then by default in the traveler's name. So it would say Robert J. Lee, box number, 354967. So some background on that. And then the final payment option is by wire. If you select wire, it'll say, please fill out the wire form and attach the expense report. This link will bring you to the accounts payable wire page. And on that page, you'll see there's embedded within the page, there's a wire form. It's a PDF form. And just make sure that you are filling that out and attaching it to the expense report, and make sure you're hand typing it and not handwriting it. The reason it's important to type the information because the accounts payable wire desk has to manually input that information like into the Bank of America software and stuff like that. So that's why they ask that it be typed. Just that way it's clear and easier to read and everything gets entered accurately. And wire payments are pretty, they can be kind of tricky sometimes. Foreign banks are very strict in the requirements, making sure all the account codes are there and everything like that. So keep that in mind with the wire process. And wire payments also have a $15 fee associated with them, and they're generally only being sent to like foreign banks. I think the accounts payable office generally will reject it if it's, you know, for a domestic wire. And departments are usually trying to avoid it anyways because it's extra work with the wire form, and then their budget eats an additional $15 fee and everything like that. So, but there are a lot of times where we're supporting travel. They live in a foreign country, and a lot of times just getting them a check maybe either very, very difficult or it could actually be impossible. We've seen that in cases where they just won't accept, you know, checks in US dollars and stuff like that. So where a wire payment would be the only way we could even get them the money. So just keep that in mind with all the, as far as the payment options go. I'm going to flip this back to direct deposit and switch this to the UDA box number. All right, and at this point, last but not least, we need to document the expense report. So you may be wondering, okay, once I get to this point, how do I attach my receipts or add any comments, anything like that? On this screen, okay, I just want to shorten my browser so you can see it. There we go. On this screen, you'll see a comment and an add attachment box at the bottom. So if you come to here, you can add comments or add attachments, and that will add comments or attachments just to the whole report itself. But there is also another way you can add comments and attachments. And I'm going to go to items. So you remember there's the two main screens. And if I come back into one of the line items, so turning it yellow, like I mentioned, you'll see there's paperclip and, or sorry, this comment box, like a little chat box and paperclip right here. You can add comments and attachments to the line item level. And what'll happen is a little image will show up right here. Like you'll see that little white chat box, or you'll see that little paperclip, and that means that a comment or an attachment has been attached to that line item. And so sometimes I get asked, so which way should I be doing it? Since I have the option, it's totally up to you. We don't have like a mandate or a compliance that says you have to do it either way. If you're completely unsure, what I would do is recommend is just chatting with, you know, your reviewers and just seeing what their preference is. If it's left up to you, some approvers may say, oh, you know, I actually just prefer when it's all in one big PDF, or some may say, you know, I really like when you separate it out in the line items. And so just keep that in mind. It's up to you. Whatever works best with your workflow. Everybody's a little bit different. And so that's the documentation. But so once you finish that, then at this point you are actually ready to submit the report. And to do that, you're going to click the submit button right here. So if I click submit and click submit again. Oh, and so kind of what this is, this request has generated a warning. Just so you know, it's actually not even really a warning. It's just a reminder. It's just saying scan and attach all receipts documents. So when you get to this point, if you've already attached all the documents, you've already finalized the report, you can basically just ignore this and then click submit. It's there as a reminder just to say, hey, make sure you did your attachments. But if you click submit, and this is the good screen. So the expense report has been submitted for approval. If there were any like systematic errors, or like let's say you had forgot to put a budget number on one of the line items, it would error out. Or if you didn't answer one of the questions in the summary section, it's going to error out. So, but once you get to this screen systematically, this is the good screen. So this means there were no errors. It's left your camp and it's in what's called submitted status. And I'll touch on the statuses here in a second. And so for the end of class, we're going to just spend a little bit of time on showing you where that report went, how to track it down. Let's say you need to make changes and all that kind of fun stuff. But what I'm going to do is just come back to the travel dashboard. So clicking that travel button at the top. And the easiest way to find a report that you had submitted is, like I mentioned earlier on, the where your documents that you created yourself go is the My Documents section. So the easiest way to track something down you made yourself is to just go ahead and go to the My Documents. So you'll see it right here at the top when you come to the My Documents right here, Robert Lee San Diego Conference, June 3rd through 5th. One thing I will point out is this screen right here this scroll right here is a preview screen. So it's actually not showing every single one that I've created. So I just like to point that out because if you're trying to find something older, it may not be showing up in this screen initially right here. And that's because you need to come over here to view more and then expense report. So you'll see in parentheses it says 322. If you scroll, that's clearly not 322. It's more like, 20 things or so. So if I come to view more expense report, this is where I come to sort of get to everything that I've created myself. Since we're in the training site, it's going to look a little bit quirky, but this is where the My Documents, view more, expense report. Now I know I'm looking at everything I've actually created, essentially since the beginning. One thing that's good to know is you can sort by date created. So if you come over here and sort by the column, if you kind of like generally know when the report was, you could sort by the date and then kind of go take that approach to find something. There are some search filters. These search filters are the same as when you do the other search function. I'm going to kind of go over those, but just know you can also do search criteria within your My Documents. Another thing is, sorting by the status, and I'll touch on kind of what those statuses are, but sorting by date created is definitely a useful one to know. But let's go ahead and pull up the report as if you had found it. So once we get to here, so let's say that you had submitted the report and now you know that there's something wrong with it and you want to go in there right away and make changes to it. So let's say you went in a meeting and you remembered in the meeting, oh whoops, I never included that car rental receipt, or maybe you got an email from a reviewer saying, hey, there's something wrong with this, I need to go make a change. What you do then is you come in the screen, you're going to click this edit button right here. And so what the edit button does is it's going to pull it out of submitted status and put it back in that edit mode, or what we refer to as composing status. To see the status report, you'll see up here, status submitted. So there's 3 different statuses of the report. When we were working on it, that was the composing status. When it's been submitted, and essentially the entire time it's in the approval flow, or going through the approvals, it's going to remain in submitted status until the very last approval is given. And then when that very last approval is given, it goes into a status called process. And so those are the 3 statuses. So composing, when it's submitted status all the way to the end of the approvals, and then into process. But what the edit button does, it will pull it out of submitted status, it will put it back into composing status, it will put you right in the report and let you make changes. Withdrawal is similar in that it will pull it out of submitted status, but what withdraw does is it just puts it back in your My Documents section. What you're saying is you don't want it to be submitted anymore, but you want to go work on it later. So the withdraw button will not delete the report or anything like that. It just says, I don't want this submitted anymore. I need, come back to this and make changes later. There are print options. So if you come to print configuration, kind of the main one is this one right here, print the full details of each line item, yes or no. If you click no, it's just a little bit more of a summary section. So things like just what the line item is, the amount, like the budget that paid for it. Whereas if you click yes, then it starts to show things like the meal details, the meal breakdown, like the flight details of the flights they're flying in and out, or the airports they're flying in and out of, and just things like that. But you may want to play around with it. If the print version's not showing all the details you want, you might want to flip those around. This copy function, what the copy function does is it copies that expense report into a new expense report. So essentially it just populates all the information, then builds it into a new report. And there are certain cases where that becomes useful. It's generally like when something was wrong and we're trying to like reissue or rebuild an expense report or something like that. But just so you know, that's what the copy function does. But what doesn't doesn't carry over are the comments and the attachments. So if you had comments and attachments from that report and they need to carry over to the new one, just know that the copy will not bring those because that information is protected. So it needs to be re-added when you do the new one, but it'll copy everything besides those comments and attachments. The next thing we're going to take a look at is the approval flow. So this is definitely something that's good to know as a preparer, what this approval flow is. So if you click approval flow, and to get to that, it's right here, this tab right here, so summary approval flow. And this is what the approval flow looks like. Right now, since I'm working out of the training site, one thing with the training site is it does not link to the approvals properly. So this is going to look a little bit different than production, but it'll give you a good idea of what it looks like and just where you can find this information. But coming to the approval flow is definitely something that's very important to know as a preparer, because what'll happen is you'll have travelers asking you for like a status of the report. So they may say, hey, I thought you had, submitted this expense report and I haven't got paid yet, things of that nature. Or even like people in your department may be saying, hey, well, did you finish that report? Where is it at? Stuff like that. This is where you can really hone into those details. So I can see, okay, this is the next person who's supposed to approve, and so forth. As far as the approvals go, so it goes like in a timeline like this. So Robert can't give the approval before this gives the approval. It has to go from one to the next, and then once it finishes that whole series, then it goes into process status. So it's saying travel office because it's getting confused because we're in the training site. But what it would be saying is compliance approver. And what you can do, so the purple exclamation point means that's the next person to approve. When it turns green, that means it's been approved. If it ever turns red, that means it was denied. But one thing that's good to know is you can click into here. You can actually see who can give that approval. So generally, departments will have at least 2 people that can give each one. So if something needs to be expedited, or you're wondering why it's held up, travelers trying to get paid, you can come in here and see, okay, this person hasn't approved yet. And you can actually click into that person, get their email, and you can shoot them an email and say, hey, this report's held up, can we get this expedited? And it looks like you're next to approve, stuff like that. So as prepared, it's definitely good to be aware of this approval flow. You can also add approvers. So there's a functionality in which you can search people, add additional approvals. These are the automatic approvals that get built, but just know there is also functionality in which you can add approvals, additional approvers to that approval flow. So you can't remove those approvals because they're all automatic, but you can always add more approvals because it would just be more strict than how the natural approval flow is. Okay. This history tab keeps track of just kind of like a running log of everything going on in the report. So it's saying, that I had submitted it at, 3:30 p.m. And then essentially it's just going to keep a log as things happen to the report. So when someone approves it, or if someone edits it, stuff like that, or denies it, it's just going to start to track that and put stamp timers on it. Policy justifications, I wouldn't worry about too much. These are just certain things tagged in which additional justification was given within the report. So for example, that car rental, if I left it as UW business and provided a reason, it would just highlight it here. So it's just a way of just highlighting things in which additional justifications were given for that expense. So if you see stuff listed there, don't worry too much. It just means there was an area in the report in which you were given a little bit more justification than maybe let's generally ask for. Okay. And then for the Ariba functionality, the last thing I'm going to show is just the search functionality. So if you come to search, and we're going to go to, so again, you can search other financial functions, but expense report is travel. What I just wanted to show is just know when you're doing a search that ID means expense report number. So when you call our office and have that ER number for us, this is actually where we go to search an ER. So ER, and then you type in the 6-digit number. I just like to highlight that because it's not super intuitive. It just says ID. So you wouldn't really know that unless someone told you, or if you just made the estimated guess. But just know ID is where you search the ER actual number. And when you're just doing searches in general, so you can search by traveler. So a lot as a preparer, you may be asked, can you pull my expense reports, or let me know what's been processed in my name. This is where you can figure out that information. So if you click select, select from list. Same, same as when we were looking in the directory before. If I wanted to look and see everything done in my name, do that, and then it's going to show, everything, every expense report in which I was the traveler. It's going to show up this way. So pretty snazzy to know the search functions. And then last but not least, with the search is you can change the search filters. So you'll see that a check mark is selected for ID. So that's why it's showing up as a filter. If I click it again, then it disappears. So just know that this is where you can add or remove the different search criteria as far as finding something. Okay. And so that is all that I have for the Ariba side of things. And to wrap up the class, I am just going to go to our travel office homepage real quick. So let's see. All right, I keep saying travel office. I mean travel services. We just changed our name like a week ago, so I'm still getting used to it. But we are travel services. So here we try to say travel office. It's not true anymore. We're a different office now. But let's go ahead and go. I just want to show a few things. Okay, make sure I got that right. Sorry, 1 second. All right. And so this could always look a little bit different by the time you look at our video, but just know that this is where we house our official policy information. So if you come here, policies and procedures, this is just a running list of all of the different topics. So for example, I mentioned, the change cancellation of travel plans policy a couple times. The best place to just kind of self-learn or come learn about, or if you have any questions about compliance, is to reference this information here. So that's what I meant when I was talking about that earlier in the class. And then this quick link section, we are reworking our website, and yeah, if you're looking at this video at a later date, there's a chance that this has changed, but we should have, a link to this somewhere on our homepage. But just know, yeah, to get to Ariba or what I was working out of is going to be this link right here, Ariba eTravel. So that's going to bring you the production version of the site. And then also what I highlighted is the other class. So we're working on getting some more scheduled. But just so you know, and we are changing our website, so I apologize if this looks different now. But look for somewhere on our page, we should highlight our trainings or our classes, and we teach another class called Travel Policies and Procedures. So if you're interested in learning about the actual compliance, that would be a great resource for you. And then the last thing I wanted to point out is just I had mentioned that we support, or we have a customer service, and we can support you if you have any issues with systematically or compliance and things like that. Excuse me. And this is our contact information. So we can be reached at travel@uw.edu, or you can call us at 206-543-5858. If you're calling from a university phone, you just need to dial these numbers, so 35858. And there's no preference on whether you email or if you call. It's totally up to you, whatever you prefer. I know some things are sometimes easier over email or sometimes easier over phone, so it's up to you. And then generally our office hours are 9 to 4, but we're generally around from 8:30 to 5, so you're welcome to call us anytime. If you do call, we don't answer. Just make sure that you leave us a voicemail. So we have a voicemail service. We are a small office. There's only 3 of us, so with that, a lot of times, all 3 of us are called into meetings or trainings, and so we may not always have someone at the phone. We do our best to keep someone there. So, but if someone, they don't answer, or if we don't answer, just make sure you leave us a voicemail, and we do check those, and we'll call you back as soon as possible. But thank you everybody for tuning in. Hopefully you found this helpful. And again, we're always open to any feedback, anything like that. So if you have any just general feedback for our program or anything related to this class, go ahead and shoot us an email or a phone call. We appreciate you stopping by, and best of luck with navigating the world of travel at UW. So thank you.